Most of our conversations.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Vacketta-DLA Piper Lecture on the Role of Government and the Law, which for more than a decade has brought some of the nation's most distinguished leaders here to the University of Illinois College of Law to share their experiences and insights into our nation's politics and civic affairs. This lecture series is made possible through the generosity of College of Law alumnus Carl Vacketta, class of 1965, and DLA Piper, one of the world's largest and most prestigious law firms where Carl worked for many years. Carl is not able to be here in person today, but I know he looks forward to viewing this lecture, and I want to make sure, most importantly, that he understands how grateful we are for his generosity and steadfast dedication to the College of Law and for the support of his former firm, DLA Piper. I extend a virtual welcome to all of those of you joining us via live stream at the DLA Piper offices across the continent. After a 2-year hiatus on account of the pandemic, we have the pleasure of presenting this year's lecture in person again and welcoming Michael Strautmanis, College of Law class of 1994, back to the College of Law as our distinguished speaker. Mike serves as the Obama Foundation's Executive Vice President for External Affairs, charged with helping maintain President and Mrs. Obama's legacy via the development and operation of the Obama Presidential Center and through civic engagement programming in Chicago. Making use of community affairs and outreach, government relations, and strategic partnerships, Michael has built the foundation into an anchor institution in Chicago that will catalyze economic renewal on the South Side and develop the city's next generation of leaders. In this role, he works with Chicagoans from every walk of life who seek to learn more about the Obama Presidential Center's offerings and participate in the foundation's mission to empower leaders to give back to their communities. Mike also leads the My Brother's Keeper Alliance, President Obama's signature initiative to create safe, healthy, and nurturing communities for boys and young men of color across the nation. Before joining the Obama Foundation, Mike spent over a decade in Washington, D.C., working to promote economic opportunity, to strengthen the judicial system, and to champion fairness and inclusion at the highest levels of the federal government. For 4 of those years, he served in the Obama White House as Chief of Staff to Senior Advisor Valerie Jarrett in the Office of Public Engagement and Intergovernmental Affairs. Mike began his career in government working in the Office of General Counsel at the U.S. Agency for International Development. He worked stints at the House of Representatives and the American Association for Justice before joining then Senator Obama's legislative staff, campaign, and subsequent transition team. After President Obama's first term, Mike joined the Walt Disney Company, where he led an enterprise-wide initiative to consolidate, focus, and deepen the impact of Disney's corporate social responsibility programs. An active member of Chicago's civic community, Michael serves on the boards of Everside Health, Inc., the Emerald South Economic Development Collaborative, the Billie Jean King Leadership Institute, and the Illinois Finance Authority and Headspace Health. In addition to all this, Michael was telling me he's got some really interesting personal projects in the works, so make sure you keep an eye both online and in bookstores in the coming months and years for Michael's thoughts. And of course, and very importantly, Michael is a double Illini, earning his bachelor's in science from the College of Media and his JD from the law school. He is not only a double Illini himself, but he is part of an incredibly loyal and accomplished Illini family. His wife, Damona, whom he met here at apparently a dance at the Illini Union, I think I remember right, is a triple Illini. Damona's father, William Smith, is also a triple Illini, and including his degree from the College of Law. I think Michael couldn't convince Damona to get a law degree, but that's okay. There's always time. He's still young. And Damona's mother, Dr. Charlene Smith, is a double Illini, so the orange and blue runs extremely strong in their family. Michael has been back to the College of Law many times. to engage student groups and offer his insights at various campus events, including as the keynote speaker at the College of Law's graduation a handful of years ago. It's my great honor to have him here as this year's Vacketta Lecture, so please join me in giving him a very warm and deserved welcome.
That was a wonderful introduction. The list of jobs is long. As I was sitting there listening to it, I remembered at some point in my life applying for a job and having to put together a resume and trying to figure out how to stretch, like one summer job and like a very poor volunteer activity into a whole resume. So I have to say it's entertaining.
It's nice to
see
have
the
the
difference.
opposite problem.
Exactly. That I think mostly has come with time. But no, Vic, seriously, I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me here, and I want to start this by doing what you just did to me, which is to make you uncomfortable by saying nice things about you. Look, I was always proud to have graduated from the University of Illinois College of Law. As you heard, I was here during a really important time in my life, both personally and obviously turning out professionally. And I really left this school as a more focused, a more prepared, a more knowledgeable person than when I arrived. And the school holds a special place in my heart. But I have to be honest, I didn't really think the school saw me or even thought much about me, especially after I graduated. And that was fine. I didn't expect it to be. There were alumni who had more resources than I did, who were more prestigious than me. Obviously, there's always a new class of students who need, rightfully so, the attention of the team. And so I didn't really feel badly about the fact that I didn't really hear from the College of Law after I left. I never thought that I would. But, Vic, you changed that. You reached out to me. You invited me to campus. You came to see me. In fact, in many ways, you saw me. And that affirmed everything that I actually felt about this place that I hadn't quite realized. And your leadership made me commit to doing my part for the next generation of students. And so I do hope that I've done something to help you in your unique mission here. But your generosity and kindness has done more for me than you would ever know. So thank you for seeing me. And it is really a privilege to be back on campus again. It's a privilege to be considered. I consider you to be a friend. And I deeply appreciate your leadership. So if we could, and I know this is going to happen a lot, please, for Vic, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. And now we can have the privilege of being able to hear you too.
Yes, exactly. So I'm really honored to deliver this lecture named for Carl Vacketta and D.L.R. Piper. Having this being named after such an accomplished lawyer who spent a career in Washington, D.C. at the intersection of the government and the private sector, it means a lot to me. I actually saw Carl as a role model during my time in Washington. Not only did he proudly support and sport the orange and blue, stood out in Washington, D.C. I tried to do that as well. He had built a successful career around public policy. And that was something that I was trying to do. As a young lawyer, I left Chicago only after working just a few years at a law firm. And I moved to Washington, D.C., as you heard, to work at the Agency for International Development. And it shows you something a little bit about the process of getting a political appointment, because I had not heard of the Agency of International Development before I got a job there. I didn't know a single lawyer who had followed that path, going from a law firm in Chicago to a federal appointment, political appointment in Washington, D.C. And I barely even knew that a legal career in and around government was even possible. So the opportunity to speak to you about this today, it actually brought me back to the foundation of what I believed when I was sitting in those chairs as a law student. And the kind of lawyer that I dreamed about and was thinking of wanting to become when I was a student. So by the time I was ready for graduation, I thought my path was set, or at least I knew where I wanted it to go. I had gotten a job. I was going to work as an associate in a big law firm in Chicago, which was a big deal. I was incredibly excited about it. I would work hard. I would make partner. And I did not know. I guess it got a little vague after that. So, I don't really think I had a very clear idea of what my life would be like when, well, I got to the age that I am right now. I'm over 50, I'm 53 to be exact. That would seem really old to me, I think, when I was in law school, like really old. I just want to be clear, I can say that. None of the students here can say that. I actually didn't have any idea what would happen to me after I made partner, but that seemed to be a great start. And so actually, as I thought about it, because some of my professors are here who knew that this was how I was at the time. When that happened and I was ancient, like 50, I would look back at a career and be proud of what I'd accomplished. And as you heard, I ended up taking a less conventional path. I started off working at a firm, quickly pivoted, went into government, and eventually I left the practice of law altogether. And went into public policy, politics, and philanthropy. And today, I have this incredible privilege of leading and helping shape the legacy of the 44th president at the Obama Foundation. So with all that in mind, I thought what I would do with my time here is share a few things that I've learned along the way about the role of lawyers in our civic life. And I will start with something that I learned before I ever came to this school. And it is what inspired me to become a lawyer in the first place. So I grew up in Chicago, and I went mostly to public schools. And I'm glad everybody's sitting down. This is going to be shocking. Some schools in Chicago are better than others. I got lucky. My mom was a teacher. She heard about a new public school that was opening in our neighborhood. It was a magnet school. It's called the Walt Disney Magnet School. And she worked to get me into that school. Now, this school, it had some teachers who really cared. They were really interested in shaping us as people. Now, nobody was doing anything that dramatic. I don't think they'd make any movies about my 4th grade classroom. It was probably more like Ferris Bueller's Day Off than Dead Poets Society. You guys don't know these movies at all, do you? You are determined to make me feel old. I got it. Okay. You got to see these movies. So put it this way. On occasion, I would get into a bit of trouble. Let's say, this is true, that I was banned from going out and playing at recess. But rather than have me sit in the corner, the teacher would make me read a book or watch a short film. And these lessons in these books, in these short films, were always about the same thing. It was about the people and the movements that gave me the opportunity to sit in that school. It was a mixed race, high-performing magnet school in one of the most segregated cities in the country, known as having awful public schools. And after a while, maybe because I got in a lot of trouble, that lesson eventually started to sink in. Even if I didn't live it out always as a young person, I started to realize that I had a responsibility to work hard and learn, because just a few years earlier, people had suffered, sacrificed, and even died for me to have the right to attend that school and try to live out my dreams. So as I got older, I learned more about these movements for justice and equality, strive to push this country closer to its ideals. And I started to see that so many of the things today that I took for granted, that I think we take for granted, voting rights for women, protection for the elderly, banning childhood labor, the creation of the public school system itself, all the basic rights that you're learning about, free speech, assembly, to worship or not worship as you choose, this process of taking the founding words from our documents and making them real. The goal of these movements were simple, and I know I'm going to sound like an Obama guy when I say this, but I believe it. The goal was to create change, to make that real. And that change takes a lot of people, not just the ones who are at the front of the stage, who get to stand up here and talk to you. It takes people who are in the trenches that are doing the actual work. One of my favorite quotes comes from, and I know you're not too young to know this, Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He once said, "Look for the helpers." And you know, I did. As I was watching all of that, my eye was always drawn to the people who were just off camera, just behind the scenes. And they weren't the people who were leading the speeches, making the speeches, or leading the marches. Those roles are obviously important. But not everyone can or even wants to be out front. I started watching the people who were implementing the work, who were supporting the people out in front. And I started to get drawn to, and I know this is going to make me sound like a huge nerd, but I started to get drawn to the lawyers. It also makes me sound like someone who knows how to suck up to an audience. But it's true. As I read, as I studied, I found that the lawyers were there at every step, codifying, protecting the rights that have created the civic society that we all get to live in today. Protecting leaders during and after acts of civil disobedience. Fighting for people at the margins in order to strengthen everyone, knowing that any one of us at any time could find ourselves in the minority or on the wrong side of economic power or the power of the state. In short, I learned that lawyers have this critical role in building, shaping, and protecting our democracy. Democracy is one of those words I heard a lot in the halls of this law school. And as you know, I ended up dedicating my career to participating in our civic life. Make no mistake, our democracy is not a given. It's not a guarantee. Much of human history, as I read it, is made up of groups choosing to make decisions to govern and shape society based on the principle that might makes right, or that focuses on the fear of and superiority of certain people based on things like their race, their religion, their ethnicity. So these lawyers were, and I believe continue to be, the heroes that I see, that I read about and watch in the fight to shape the society that we want our children to live in, around the world and right here in Champaign. Now, when you hear that, and even when I heard it, I think you might say, as I said, that all sounds great, but I don't want to be in any of those battles. I just want to get a good job after law school and start to live my life. Look, that's exactly what I wanted to do when I was sitting here. I admired those heroes, but I never really imagined that I would be one of them. I wasn't going to be some civil rights icon. I was like a kid from Chicago. Plus, my wife and I, not only were we married, but by the time I was a 3L, we had had our first child. Honestly, I needed a job, and I felt lucky to have one. So I went to work at a law firm, put my head down, and tried to figure out exactly what my bosses wanted me to do every day. And over the years, I just sort of plugged away. I was this young associate in the litigation practice. But I never stopped thinking or caring about those bigger issues. It's just hard to unsee once you see it. It's one of the things that this school will do for you. Once you start looking at these issues, debating right and wrong, learning about the cases and the disputes and the challenges that affect how we all live, I promise you it's going to stay with you. I don't care whether you're concerned about patent law or shaping contracts or defending a client in court. All of us involved in the law inexorably, slowly start to sharpen our sense of justice. That's what I want you to do while you're here. I want you to start asking those questions so that you can start deciding what justice means to you. What affects you? What motivates you? What gets you up in the morning? You have a privilege to be able to do that during your time here, and I want you to take advantage of it. Now look, this isn't exclusive to lawyers, right? Everybody wants to see basic fairness. It's one of the earliest values that we create as young children. When I see a toddler about to throw a tantrum, your instinct is in many ways to identify with that feeling, right? It's about justice. It's about fairness. It's baked into our DNA. So, as lawyers, here's the other promise I will make to you. No matter what you do, you will end up grappling with the challenges faced by our civic society. Now, you can choose, as many do, not to look deeper into it, to stop the idea of what's happening right there. But it is there whether you choose to look at it or not. So what do I mean? If something in society is broken, it shows up in the law. I saw this as I traveled across the country, working in communities during political campaigns, and even in the years that I worked for Barack Obama in the United States Senate. Our strained healthcare system, how does it show up? Bankruptcies for medical costs. Poverty, hunger, inequality shows up in our criminal justice system, in eviction court. Today in Chicago and in many cities all around the world, where I have friends and colleagues, some of whom are just fully in the business community, they're not even involved in the practice of law anymore. They are dealing with a deeply complicated economy with rising inflation, disruption in job creation, the impact of crime, and more. And I hear them telling me, hey, I'm in the private sector. I'm just trying to create or sustain a successful business. But the conversation always goes back to the same place. The problems that we need to grapple with as society are present in whatever you end up doing with your law degree. The proposed solutions may be different, but the root causes are the same. I'll just give you one example. When I was starting out as a young lawyer, I was aware of the lack of investment and opportunity in the almost exclusively Black neighborhoods that my family and many of my friends called home. Now, I had a set of different resources because I was living in a suburb called Oak Park. Me, my wife, and at that point, 2 little kids. My own experience with the police as a young lawyer was different because sometimes I looked like a bespectacled professional in a suit, and sometimes I looked like just another threatening large Black guy. And I guess I could have chosen to spend most of my time complaining about the things that I saw that piqued my conscience and challenged my sense of justice. I mean, after all, I was working really long hours. We had 2 kids, as I said, and we're raising two young boys, right, in this city, in this time, and that's like hard enough. But I made a different set of choices. I decided to volunteer, and I joined the board of a small boys' home for young men who were in the foster care system. It's called Jamal Place. On election days, I got up and I decided to work as a poll watcher to make sure that people were able to freely exercise their right to vote. And eventually I left the law firm and the path to partner and everything that I had planned when I was sitting in the seats that you're sitting in right now. I walked away from a job that paid me more money at 28 years old than either of my parents ever made in their career. And my family and I moved across the country to Washington, D.C. Why? I'll boil it down to something pretty simple. And for the last time, I'm going to quote Barack Obama, because he said this in a convention hall in Boston in 2004. And I remember working with him on the speech. I'm taking 0 credit for any of this, by the way. Let's just be clear about that. But he said something that resonated with me at the time. He said, if there's a child on the south side of Chicago who can't read, that matters to me, even if it's not my child. If there's a senior citizen somewhere who can't pay for their prescription drugs and has to choose between medicine and the rent, that makes my life poorer, even if it's not my grandparent. The reality to me is this. In a civic society, we cannot separate ourselves from the problems in our shared lives. They impact us, and as lawyers, we will see it. In a way, I think you're going to be civic first responders, patching up and managing the injuries and damage and disputes created by what's broken in our country and our world. And you can choose to ignore the broader implications of your work and not think about why these injuries are happening in the first place. I mean, there is always going to be a job for a lawyer in a broken world. But I want you to think about making another choice. And I think about that choice in retelling this old story. So according to this tale, there are a few people who are standing next to a river. And all of a sudden they see a person drowning, struggling, flowing in the river past them. And so the people on shore, they jump in and try to save this person. And they save him, they drag him, and it's just as they get back to the shore, they hear and see another person who's drowning and falling in the river behind him. So they save that person, and a handful more come down the river. And as they're dealing with that group, they see another person come in their way. And finally, one of them breaks away and starts running towards the shore and swim back to the bank. And they ask, they're like shocked and demand, like, where are you going? We need help pulling people out of the river. And their friend turned back to them and said, to hell with that. I'm going upstream to see if I can stop them from getting into the river to begin with. How are we and you thinking about going upstream? I mean, you could do what I did. That's one choice, right? You could work in public policy and government itself. That's the path of Carl Vacketta. You could work in a legal practice connected to the public sector. You could take your incredible legal training and end up in corporate strategy or in a nonprofit using your skills outside of the law as a profession. Or you could simply find a way to get involved in shaping our society by voting or volunteering in your neighborhood. Those basic tasks of citizenship that seemed commonplace when I was young, but that have somehow become controversial today. Finally, if you choose to accept the fact that lawyers have a unique role to play in our democratic society, I have one final ask for you. Help us create new solutions to the challenges of our time. Look, at the Obama Foundation, we're committed to supporting the next generation of leaders. And as I have worked closely with him, particularly since President Obama left office, I've come to share his passion for this younger generation. I'm looking at the students right now. I've really come to share his passion for you. You are more tolerant, more diverse, more innovative, I think, in almost any generation that has come before you. You've had to accept the reality that the pathways that were in front of me when I was sitting in your seats don't exist in the same way anymore. Like, I didn't end up staying on the path from junior associate to partner to senior partner. The reality is a law firm that you start at when you graduate likely won't even exist in the same form by the time you're even in the middle of your career. That can create a lot of anxiety, but it seems like your generation is innovating and figuring that all out. I think our civic society needs that innovative spirit as well. I believe that one of the reasons why our democratic system feels under threat is because so many people that rely on civil society to do things, those things aren't working as well anymore. We're reaching a time when the people who saw and lived through a contest of different systems of government and realized that democracy was the best way to build a fair and functioning society, they're turning the reins over to you. They remember what Winston Churchill said, that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others that have been tried. The people who saw this struggle and the pain that got us to this place, they're moving on. The lived memory of all that they endured, their blood and sweat and tears, that's coming to you. And I fear that this sense of complacency has gotten in. Like, we can take for a given that all that we have, this will always be here. I'm here to tell you right here, right now, that is not a sure thing. And at the same time, we are faced with unresolved inequity, stubborn systemic injustice. And when that happens, a certain cynicism can creep in. People can ask themselves, what's the point of participating in and defending the values that underpin our country if it's not working for large parts of our population? So much that we hold dear. The recognition of universal rights, the peaceful resolution of disputes, the rule of law itself can come into question. And that's what's taking place. Online, across the world, right here in the US. But when I look at our history, I see that lawyers have come together and created solutions to these challenges and built institutions and a legal framework to move us ever closer to our shared ideals. So the good news is, there's room for you to play your role in this inspiring story. You just have to step up and do it, no matter where you go. I mean, if it's in politics or government, we need ethical and civic-minded legal minds. If it's in the private sector, we need lawyers who can help companies succeed in a market-based society and also strengthen the very society that has created the unprecedented wealth and opportunity for those businesses themselves. If it's working with nonprofits or other organizations that have this explicit mandate for social impact, we need you to come in and help them innovate and build a strategy to succeed in the world as it exists today. And be ready to rapidly change and evolve. I mean, you all know how to do that. So, I'm winding down here. So as I do, let me go back to the beginning. My beginning. How my family, how I got here in the first place. You see, my father's family fled Latvia. They adopted me. That's where I got this funny last name. They came to the United States because of the promise of freedom, based on everything that I'm talking about here. The rule of law, the protection of individual rights, that famed pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. That's what brought them from Latvia to a displaced persons camp in Germany to Evansville, Indiana to Chicago, Illinois. My mother's family came here from the Caribbean for the same reasons, inspired by the same things. Even understanding as they did the structural racism that was fully in place during that time. This striving, this yearning for freedom is our greatest strength as a society. It still shines as a beacon to people all over the world. It gives hope to people who need it. It provides meaning for all of us, but it does not run itself. We need people to do the actual work of keeping our democracy and our society working for the best of all of us. That's what I want you to do. I want you to do this work. I know that you can. And along the way, I predict that you will find joy and fulfillment and growth and having a life in the law that connects you to something bigger than yourself. This 50-something-year-old guy is here to tell you that life is short and there is no better way to live. So go and do it. Thank you very much.
So we have 15 or more minutes for questions. Michael kept his remarks, I think, on the shorter side so that we could hear some answers he has to any of your questions. So you can feel free to come up to a microphone. As you are collecting questions, maybe I'll throw one out for you right now. You know, it's always kind of inspirational to hear someone like you talk about, you know, what you've done and why and where we're at. But then, you know, I look at what's going on in DC now.
Yeah.
And I look at the two parties we have.
Yeah.
And I look at, you know, I look at CNN's news feed every day. I look at Fox News web feed every day. And I guess, you know, at their best, lawyers can help bring people together for solutions, like you said. You can identify common ground. You can employ fact-based, evidence-based reasoning. You can kind of strip away those things that aren't at issue to focus on those that are, and then come up with solutions. But you know, legal skills of the kind we teach here can also be weaponized.
Yes.
And they can be used to really make someone look bad, to ridicule them. I mean, you know, there's tons of times in my family when Karen will say, you know, I'm asking her a question, she's like, you know, you're interrogating me, you're cross-examining me. I'm sure you might get that too sometimes. And
I get that a lot. We've had to work that one out.
And so I'm just wondering, what can we do in law schools to make sure that people who come out of school with these skills kind of understand the first part of kind of problem solving and identifying kind of middle common ground, as opposed to attacking people in sharp ways to make them look bad, because that's all I see out there now.
And I will tell you, I see it on all sides of the spectrum. The kind of weaponizing of arguments, mostly designed to make someone look bad. I'd say a couple things, and the first thing I'm going to say is, it's going to sound like a joke. I mean it quite seriously. Turn off CNN and Fox and MSNBC and Twitter, because you are only participating in an economy that's built on algorithms that is generated to spark your emotions, mostly to get you angry, because it's the emotion that will keep you engaged and following, and then you're angry enough that you want to do something, but there's nothing to do but keep watching or press like, and every time you do that, you're adding to the economy that's built on your attention, that's built on making you angry. So I just would say, and having seen that up close, I know that it's an industry. And I know that that industry is built on influencing a very small number of people. You know, there's a friend of mine named Dan Pfeiffer, who's a communications director for us at the White House, who just put out a little piece about Twitter. And he said, you know, if you think about the White House Chief of Staff, outgoing White House Chief of Staff, Ron Klain, he spent a lot of his time on Twitter, and people would kind of make fun of him as he was talking about like gas prices. And he's like, you're White House Chief of Staff, you know, why are you every day on Twitter talking about gas prices? And he was doing it because he was trying to get the 25 people who were paying attention to Twitter every day, which happened to be the people in the news media who cared about that stuff, to write about the fact that gas prices were falling. He was not so I just say that's not the real world. And I think one of the things that is you have the opportunity to do in this law school, because you're in Champaign, Urbana, is you have the opportunity to connect students to the real world, where the challenges that they see, I always find that, you know, small town mayors, no matter where they are, literally in any country in the world, are the most practical. You find a small town mayor, they could be in like, you know, in the middle of the biggest, hottest disputes in the world, where there's so much ideology that literally death is on people's doorsteps, Middle East, what have you. But small town mayors, they have to actually solve real problems. And I think connecting your students and their passions for impact and understanding the law, and then connecting it to a real problem, puts them in a position where the ideology is really a waste of time if you're going to actually get something done. And I think that and I think it also builds a set of values that we need when they're engaged in these broader, larger challenges. Because, and I guess the last thing I'd say is this. As much as I sometimes don't want to believe it, almost everyone that I've ever worked with when I was involved in national policy or politics got up every day, they thought they were doing the right thing. They thought they were doing what was necessary to participate. And I think that people who are willing to enter into that contest with a set of values that will allow them to see through the mechanics of the game that's played, and be able to be willing to use those tools and understand policy and understand the way government works in order to drive towards a set of common values, which is basically solving a problem, making sure that this thing that people need is actually done. I think that kind of approach you can build here, and we desperately need it. And the goal, last thing I'll say on this is, I think partially the goal in many of the conversations that we're having in our civic life, and particularly in our political life, is to win the argument. And I think that takes everyone who's watching it and makes them feel like the people who are supposed to be thinking about them aren't. They're thinking about themselves, and they're like, you're watching a debate. And if you ever watch a debate, even as you have debates here or mock trial, it's really interesting. It's really fascinating. But it's pretty clear they're not worried about you and the audience, right? They're not actually there to solve your problem. And I think when that comes in public life, that's very debilitating, very dispiriting. But I think particularly you all can disrupt that, because I think those people who come in who are countercultural in that way, who are actually there to solve problems and talk about, they end up like popping and shining. And I think being able to have a tremendous amount of influence, because it's too rare to see. So I'm sure there are other questions. I can go on and on this one. But I'm petering out. So what else do people want to know? I did ride on Air Force One. We can talk about that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're going to have to introduce yourself to me.
Yes, my name is Kola Omoyajo. I'm a lawyer licensed to practice in Nigeria and a graduate student here at College of Law.
Great.
Thank you for the inspiration.
You had a very interesting election.
Yes, we had an election couple. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, when I was in the third year during my undergraduate studies in Nigeria, I wrote a public letter to the governor of my province, challenging some numbers of a number of activities that I felt were against democratic ideas and principles and against the common interest and welfare of the people. Less than 24 hours after then, I got an information that the State Department of Security were looking for me to get me arrested for challenging the province governor. In other words, I came from a country where to be a lawyer and to fight for the promotion of democracy, an average lawyer must pass through, within the corridors of the prison system, detention or intimidation. So looking at democracy at a globalized level and the roles that lawyers play in promoting the ideas of democracy, how do we begin to build strategies that, number one, protect the lawyers who are actors in the fight
Yes.
for democratic promotions and ideals, and at the same time, in the part of the country I came from, because of the dangers that lawyers, especially in the civic society, are faced with, most law graduates and law students are afraid to delve into that aspect of
Yes.
legal practice again. So how do we revive these
Yes.
across the globe, and especially in underdeveloped climes?
I appreciate it. I think that my answers will be based on some limited experience and based on some of the conversations that we've had. Because the Obama Foundation, among other things, has a leadership program in Africa where we have a wide range, hundreds of leaders who are participating in it, and we talk to them. And the idea is to train them and give them a set of tools. And so I'd say a couple things based on my experience and based on those conversations. I think the first is that, when I have seen, change take place, and you think about something like, I was working at the White House when the country legalized gay marriage. And I think that ended up being this thunderclap, I think, as President Obama has called it. But there were all of these sort of quiet, small acts, radical acts of courage that took place, of people choosing to love their kid no matter what they said they were and who they said they loved, choosing to hire someone, choosing to accept people as they came out, choosing to, right, making those decisions, that ended up building in many ways into legal strategies and cases that happened, you know, in communities and states around the country. And then, you know, it culminates in this big moment. And I think what I've seen is that often there are opportunities for lawyers in particular to do what feel like very small things, but that are really quite courageous, particularly in, you know, circumstances as you're describing, but in others. And to understand that that is how you end up creating a different society. The second thing I'd say is that, you know, this is where old-fashioned community organizing can make a difference, because there are opportunities to not be alone in this work, and opportunities to build coalitions of support that have the opportunity in many societies, whether they are vibrant democracy, wherever they are on the democracy scale, right? Large numbers of members of community society can end up influencing the direction that things go. And I think that often I would love to have lawyers understand that the process of building consensus and support at a community level is worth doing. Now, it means you got to compromise. It means you have to, you know, engage with people who may not have the same understanding of the concepts that you do. It means you have to kind of figure out where they are and what they're dealing with. This is why I love the very practical tools you can get in the community, like Champaign-Urbana. You got to come and, you know, they haven't come to this law school. They don't want to come to this law school. They think everything that goes on in this law school is a waste of time. And yet they need legal help. And you've got to come meet them where they are and engage with them. That kind of community work can end up building a consensus around change and around something that needs to happen. So every battle is not fought in the courts. And every battle is not a lonely one. And every battle is not necessarily a dangerous one. And the last thing I'd say is that one of the really remarkable things about the society that you students are in right now is that you can connect and learn practical lessons from people who don't live around you, right? You have the digital access that you have is incredible for learning practical lessons. I think the challenge is that it had the promise of doing that, but economically it's not built to do that. Economically, it's built to have you watching the next TikTok video. And so you've got to create and carve out the society. Almost you've got to community organize and build that coalition and that community yourself digitally in and around where you are. So last thing I say, I'm really glad you're here. I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad you're adding your perspective to the work of the University of Illinois and to the community in Champaign. And you know, I look forward to, you know, being in community and coalition with you along the way.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Got time for one more? Yeah, two more, yeah.
Let's do two more. I promise I won't make each answer
Come down to the,
like
and then
another
let's come down here.
speech. But I knew I was going to do that, which is why I saved time.
You spoke a little
What's
bit
your name?
about MSNBC.
So what's your name?
What's your name?
Sorry, my name is Will.
Hey, Will.
Ravel, I'm a 2L student
Great.
here at the College of Law. You spoke a little bit about, you know, don't pay attention to MSNBC, Fox News, it's all driven by algorithms. And then you spoke a little bit about community organizing and building consensus. And I suppose my question is, because our consensus and our society is so integrated with all of these algorithms, these social media platforms and everything, how do you think about interfacing with those algorithms to help build consensus? And how do you think about how the work that lawyers do can, a lot of the time, the positive things that you talk about can be combated by people who are using these algorithms maliciously?
Well, first of all, that's definitely something I want you all to figure out. Because I just learned about, I don't even really know, I'm just sort of learning what the word algorithm means. It's kind of a joke, but it's actually quite serious. I think that's the task of your time. I think that in my reading of history is that there are always new media tools, and those media tools end up disrupting societies in ways that are exciting and create new opportunities for people who didn't have them before, but in ways that are often quite challenging for the civic society and for our politics. If you go back and look at McCarthyism, if you go back and look at a bunch of things, part of some of the story of all of that are new communication tools that have ended up atomizing some people and disrupting others. I think what I would tell you is that a couple things. One, being aware of the dialogue that's happening in the media, being able to participate in that dialogue is important. So I don't want you to fully turn it off. I just don't want you to think that reflects it reflects reality as much as possible, right? It is designed for a certain outcome. That's number one. Number two, I would say that as I just described, the digital tools that you have are incredibly powerful, but they are designed for you to be used by them, not to use them. And the frightening kind of insidious thing about it is you do think you're using them, right? You feel like you're using them to curate this world that, is all the stuff that you like, and you get up every day, and I know what's going on with U of I basketball. I know what's happening in spring training at the Cubs. I see, all the people that like my LinkedIn post. And I see, my like sister-in-law's kids. And I feel like, man, I've created my own garden. Like, this is the world that I've always wanted to live in. But that's that's what they want me to think, so that I continue to participate in it. And so I think the opportunity is to get very clear about the purpose of the tools that you have at your disposal, what they can do to achieve the goals that you want to see and what they can't, and start to practice the engagement that you want to participate in offline. That's the kind of magic of being in law school, is you actually have an opportunity to make mistakes, play around with stuff, practice, what it's going to be like when you're out there while you're learning. And you have professors and teachers who actually are just like, I will tell you this, it didn't seem that way, but I've learned it. They actually want to talk to you about this stuff. They would love for you to come in their office with a bunch of questions about, hey, we're trying this, and how we're grappling with this, and this isn't working, and this is what I want to do. So my encouragement to you is pick an issue, make it as narrow as you can, save the theoretical stuff for the class where you got to learn and grapple with that stuff. Make it very narrow, make it very practical, make it something that you care about, that you know something about, and even something that maybe impacts you or impacts somebody that you care about. Find some other people around you who care about that too, and start figuring out what's the path to like solving it. And do kind of and this is maybe something you could look up, do like a good power analysis. Like, why is that, happening? I'll tell you just one quick story. There was a young person who lived in the southwest side of Chicago who's really upset because their grandmother had diabetes, and every time she would send her to go get some food at the corner store, she only had access to food that would make her grandmother's condition worse. And so she started asking, like, why isn't there any fresh food in my neighborhood? And started to find out about, why grocery stores make the decisions that they do. She was participating in a program, so we did a good power analysis. We looked at the tools that she had, and she went to the liquor store and said that she and her friends were going to march and picket outside the liquor store every day until they started putting vegetables in. And the person who was running the liquor store said, okay, I'll do it, but it's a waste of money because the vegetables rot because no one buys them. And they're like, we will guarantee you this amount of people will buy your vegetables if you do it. They did it. The sense of the bodega changed. It got great loyalty from the neighborhood. They kind of changed their business model, and now there's fresh food in the neighborhood. A 16-year-old did that. So I think, getting real practical and finding a way to use and understand the tools you have is the path forward. Hope that answers your question. All right, great.
One more, last one.
I said that was going to be short, turned out not being short.
Okay.
I'm Anthony Atuel, and I really liked Will's question, and I guess mine is the flip side of that.
Okay.
As someone kind of interested in public service, I've heard a lot that when you do a good job, nobody really knows you've done anything at all. And I guess just from looking at the public, it seems like people, the rule of law is only salient for people when they feel like it's not helping them, or when they feel like it's gone astray. And so I guess, our current, right now we live in a sort of a free society where our institutions are kind of hands-off, and individuals and kind of community organizing is supposed to happen at grassroots levels.
Yeah.
But when we have all these issues like algorithms on social media and whatnot that are more systemic, how can our institutions defend the rule of law while also maintaining neutrality and kind of making sure the checks and balances are still enforced and kept up?
Well, I think one of the challenges is, and this is just my particular analysis, but I actually think you should think of social media as the latest structure that's put in place. I actually think all of our institutions have a structural set of values and goals that they're trying to achieve. I actually don't believe there are any neutral institutions because they're created by human beings. And I think most of them are actually, I hate to burst a bubble of the conspiracy theorists in the room. I actually don't think most of them are evil. I think most of them are just built to perpetuate themselves. Because everybody who's in them wants to keep their job and has a particular framework that defines what they do as important and where they do it as important. I think and so one of the cool things about law school that you're learning is that there's contests, right? Things are, if there are different views and different viewpoints, and if you accept that everyone has different views and different viewpoints, well, how do we work it out, right? Kill each other about it, or go to court, right? You could, right? And so participating and understanding how to deal and make decisions on contesting views, I think is a basic framework and something that's important for you to learn and learn how that works. I think that what I would say is that the opportunity so yes, there is silent toiling in public life to be involved in something good. But particularly when you're dealing with a person in their life, they know what you've done for them. They know what you've done for them. And as it builds to something bigger, those are the things that literally change the world. And so I think that I would not get overawed. I would ask you not to get overawed and dismayed by the complexity of the world that you live in, by the size of the structures that you're involved in, and think that there isn't anything that you can do. If there's anything I want you to take from my time here today, is not only is there something for you to do, but the opportunity to disrupt and innovate based on the world that you see is literally the thing that other generations have done before you. and this is your number one opportunity and task and opportunity to do. And the things that irritate you, piss you off right now, that's the stuff you should start with.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Michael, we can't thank you enough for having given of your time and your wisdom. I have to tell you personally, you have been kind of a beacon for our students and our faculty and alums. And even if it's when I'm not dean, I hope you continue to come down here and talk to our students and faculty all the time. Michael has graciously agreed to hang out a little bit in the pavilion. There's a reception and there's some food. He has to head back to Chicago after that, but if you have something you want to ask him about, he'll be there. And I think we have a little gift that we want to give him too that we can bring from upstairs. But let's all give him just the warm